audience. I think post-lunch, we have the dreaded post-lunch session, but we'll try to make it interesting for all of you. I'm sure both the topic and the panelists here will give you a rich perspective into something which is of extreme relevance to all retailers and all brands and all of you out here. So just to introduce the topic, right, I think we're talking about how do you take a brand national? How do you really grow a brand and become successful across the country as the first step, and perhaps even internationally? So from a growth perspective across different sectors, what are some of those triggers that will really help you resonate, connect with customers, and really enhance your success across a wider footprint? So that's one part of the story that we'll talk about, and that's one. The second element is, as you look to expand, what are those key factors that you really need to take into account while choosing new markets? Particularly if, from a regional retailer perspective, do you look at expanding within a cluster? Do you look at scaling up quickly in some of the best markets out there? So how do you really take your footprint, expand it, and grow successfully? So I think those are two of the key themes that we'll look to talk about over the next 45 minutes. I think in our panel today, we have fantastic representation across women's ethnic, across wellness, across a famous brand from fragrances, across bespoke tailoring. So I think we've got a good representation of different subsectors, and it'll be useful to hear how our panelists have actually experienced that in their respective companies and how they believe some of these key burning questions can really be addressed. So we'll throw the floor open. I think we'll start with what is at the root of this topic, right? So how do you really take your brand national? So you might be successful in a particular city, in a region. People might know about your brand purely by word of mouth, having visited your stores. As retailers or as kind of connected consumers, connected industries, how do you then scale up? Like, how do you take your brand successfully? How do you connect with customers in a market like India, where you have a fairly heterogeneous customer mix? So I think we'll start with Manohar. Good to get your thoughts on this starting topic.
I think the first thing to do is to make a plan where you want to be, how many cities, how many outlets in each of these cities, and then make a plan. You don't just plunge into the expansion without thinking. It's a very, very well-planned strategy which has to be done. You may follow the cluster approach, which makes a lot of sense for us. What we do is first we study the city, what is the population, what is the scope, how many stores I can open, what is the media available, what is the cost of the media, what is the competition over there, what they are doing, and then we decide to open over there. And we decide, like, let's say a city like Hyderabad, I know I can open 10 stores, right? So it's very easy for me to go to Hyderabad. I can afford a good area manager, I can afford a warehouse, I can afford to advertise. If I go to a city where I can open only a store, one store, I can't advertise, I can't have a warehouse for quick refilling, I can't have a good area manager. So these are disadvantages. But then you have to go to some of these tier 2 cities, and you make a plan and then start your expansion.
Sure.
You don't fall into the temptation of taking one store somewhere far away, which you will visit probably once in 6 months. You can't afford advertisement, good area manager. None of these things can be avoided.
Sure. So when you follow, essentially what you're laying out is more of a cluster approach. Ketan, what are your thoughts? Have you seen other approaches that have worked, or you also believe essentially going through like clusters, first scaling up there is a good way to start off your expansion?
So I'll share our experience. We're mainly based out of Bangalore until we opened our first store in Chennai a few years ago. So we realized that for us it's more of a back end. We have to take care of the back end really to get out of our current market, because everything that we do, especially in the bespoke tailoring side of the business, is in-house, and we don't outsource it, and we centralize it. So which means that we need to make sure that the back end is ready. So we kind of follow a hub and spoke model, where we'll have a hub for tailoring, and then we will use that hub and spoke it out into various channels in around that particular market. So we opened the Chennai store, and we've had success there. So we are ready to open some more stores in the area, so that we can use the same hub to replicate that what we've got running in the current market there in Chennai. So we use that model.
Okay. What I hear from, I think both Manohar and Ketan is more from a back-end internal perspective. I think it'll be useful to understand, Kiran, from a market point of view. How do you open up new markets? How do you connect with consumers? Say if you're strong in Bangalore and Hyderabad, how do you fundamentally go to a completely different market, say in the West or in the East?
Absolutely. I wear two hats. One is the hat of the managing partner of N. Rangaravan Sons, which is the custodian of cycle brand Agarbattis. And here the dynamics of entering new markets are completely different, because we are looking at an FMCG model where you need to prospect the market, you need to understand the existing distribution networks there, and this is very product category agnostic, as in you would find that in Agarbattis, the dealer network is very strong in certain markets, and in certain other markets it's not. But at a macro level, you would certainly have to take the approach of understanding who the total population index, as mentioned by a fellow panelist. You would then have to understand, the kind of reach that you need to have, the journey cycles that have to be planned out. So it's completely planned out in terms of systems and process, in terms of how many people and what kind of distributor and depot network you need to access those many retail outlets. And once you have this plan in place, as an established brand with presence in the South, we have a lot of rub-off in terms of advertising on national television and so on, to have a halo effect to then go and expand into new markets. For us, the northern markets are not very well established. Our penetration is lower. But the other thing that we also need to do is consumer expectations are also different. And we are in the sensory market. So cultural sensory perceptions of consumers are very important in understanding what fragrance preferences they have. And as a company, we create our fragrances ourselves. So we need to understand what preferences of consumers are. So we get into a complete process of fragrance creation, application, and evaluation, and then have a panel to test what fragrances are successful in different markets, and then have new product introductions for those markets. And once you have those introductions, then you need to do a pilot launch to ensure that there is acceptance, and then scale up immediately, rapidly scale up after the pilot is proven. The other hat that I wear is that of Iris, where it's a smaller brand, it's a wellness brand. What we do is we do home fragrance products which complement both your lifestyle through decor accessories and fragrances, which is about sensory perception. Here, growth takes on a different perspective. Here you grow in bigger cities, and the approach will be to go to specific centers where people have a predisposition to spend on decor and so on.
Okay, great. I think the other, just picking up from where you left, there are some subsectors where consumer experience of your retail, of your brand is really important. And success in that space really comes in from customers experiencing the service that you provide. So these will typically be a little difficult in my mind to really scale up. So maybe introducing CK from your perspective, your brand, how have you seen, it's a wellness brand where people really need to come in, experience it. So how is scalability something which you look at?
The typical Indian market so far has been a little bit of an evolving stage where the unorganized market is becoming organized. So we have the luxury of making little mistakes and correcting that mistakes and moving forward, which is what is the approach we have done. Typically, ideally, if we had done, we should have had a full-fledged training center and all those stuff on the back end to be completely ready before we had gone front end. We had taken a more a front end approach, and then we went back and now putting the back end together. And that's what we have done. One good thing what we have done is in the south, we have around close to 460 stores, and where we have clustered the market very heavily in this market. We used franchising system. Franchising, simply put, is using other people's time and money. But the right definition for franchising is using other people's time and money responsibly. When you put the word responsibility to the equation gains power. Whereas we have made mistake in the non-South market, we have put lot of, wherever there is an inquiry, we went ahead and opened it, and that has put us in more trouble, because it is very difficult, as Manohar was saying, it is very difficult to support the one-off stores and things like that. That we have, I think I should have met Manohar before. I would not have made that mistake. But I have made that mistake, and now learning from my own experience, it is costing much. But that's okay, that is a part of life, and we need to keep moving.
Sure. So on the topic of mistakes, right, I think a very valid point in terms of at least new markets. You really learn, and in fact, there are multiple instances of people who've expanded, seen the store not doing well, scaled back, and then done something fundamentally differently 2 years, 3 years down the line, and in fact have become extremely successful in the same location, in the same city. So Rahul, from your perspective, I think you were mentioning before, you've had experiences of this kind. So happy to hear your views on this.
Yeah. So, we've made a lot of mistakes.
Right.
So we went to Bombay, we went to Pune. We shut down Bombay, we shut down Pune.
Okay.
So we are back in Bangalore and Chennai again. But hopefully the second avatar will be quite different. So what we also see is that the customer habits are different. And it is not possible in our kind of business to fundamentally change our offering. Your entire back-end support, the products, the services which you offer is pretty much consistent across different markets. Right. So it's very hard to customize for each and every market and say, okay, for this market we'll do something different. It's easier to do it in a product business, but very hard to do it in a service business. So you have to fundamentally find the number of customers which you need in the new market who actually find your offer appealing. Mm-hmm. There are enough customers, but you have to find the right customers for your brand. And the way of reaching the customers, I think the market is also changing. And the way to reach them today with technology, our business is changing very rapidly. And I think the amount of money, we were amongst the first company to raise institutional funding. But today, people who have never been in the wellness business have raised 10 times the amount of money I ever raised. And they're going to come and spend all that money trying to recruit customers. They're going at it through technology. They're going at it through aggressive discounting. So the customer expectations are also going to change. Right. And it is going to be very important to figure out a model which we can export to the other markets. Sure. So the conventional model, our model we realized is not a model which we can take and scale nationally. Mm-hmm. But then as I say, going national is good for ego, bad for business. So I'm not in a hurry to go national. Right. I would rather make a model which works nationally and then go. So my friend here has a model where he can go far quicker into a new geography because it is a franchise model. Mm-hmm. We are fully company-owned and company-operated outlets. So it takes us a very different perspective of going into a new market, as he was saying, the back end and all. So we have to get our back end right. Without that, we'll never go front end. Right. So I would always think whether my organization, my model is ready to scale first before I go into a new market. Sure. The second thing about expansion, which most people don't talk about, is that when you expand rapidly, you lose a lot of money. So are you prepared for that financially, and do you have the muscle power to do it? I've been in organizations for the last, I think, 15 years, where I've seen huge scale-ups happening in retail. And huge scale-ups just meant it's more money losses. So those organizations where there has been enough of a muscle power or financial backing to be able to handle that have successfully crossed that stage and gone into a stable mode where they have expanded and been able to stabilize. Right. Wherever the money power was not there, they have always stumbled.
Sure. Couple of interesting points there, right? I think we have to recognize the fact that in most new markets, when we look at it, there is existing competition, there is new competition, people are spending a lot of money, as you talked about, on above-the-line advertising. So in such a cluttered market, as say a smaller retailer who's looking to perhaps break into a new market, what are those clever techniques or marketing tactics that you've seen being successful? So one, obviously, we are in a digital world. We've heard a lot of discussion about connected consumers over the last 2 to 3 hours. So maybe Manohar, your thoughts on how retailers can intelligently use some of these digital marketing techniques or some things which you've seen work very well for you?
See, it's always about how much sale you're doing and what percentage of that you can spend. And the most economical way you can spend your media advertising budget is digitally, because that's the only medium where you can focus on exactly your target customer. Of course, you have to do this very cleverly through Facebook, Twitter, things like that. And it's really economical, very, very well targeted. When you put an ad in the paper, you put an ad in the Times, it's going to be all over Karnataka, but your audience is only Jayanagar. In Facebook, Twitter, a lot of these mediums, you can target only Jayanagar customers. If you're in Jayanagar only, you advertise only in Jayanagar, target those customers. You can do this through Facebook, Twitter, you can do it with collaborating with the credit card companies, and they will collaborate with you and send out the mailers only to Jayanagar customers. You can target only ladies, you can target ladies of a certain age. It's really amazing what you can do with the electronic media marketing.
Right, right. Kiran, your thoughts on that? I think you were mentioning a slightly different approach to perhaps more above the line marketing, more mass media. What are your thoughts? Have you seen that shift for your new startup business? Do you see newer technology-oriented marketing working better, perhaps?
Absolutely. For the Iris business, we have our products in home decor stores, and we have our own stores as well. And we have employed social media and other digital marketing means extensively. We create a lot of excitement in the category. Our category is such that it's very nascent, and we are actually creating a market. We're creating a need in a sense. So we are educating people all the time about what different fragrances can do, because this is about sensory perception. And as a market, for our kind of products, the usage and the penetration by the Indian consumer is quite low. So we need to create and retain sufficient interest in the consumer's mind for them to keep engaging. And the best way of doing that certainly is through social media and digital marketing. And we've done that, and a lot of competitions, we've talked about specific fragrances and their impact on mood, emotions, and so on. Gifting is a very, very important thing. As a category, our category has a lot of opportunity for growing in gifting, and we've used this medium for different occasions of gifting, be it Valentine, Mother's Day, Father's Day, or different occasions. And it's paid off quite well. I think on using the digital medium, we have made the consumer walk into our store, by talking to them online, by them engaging amongst themselves online, and then coming into our store and looking at these things. Another very interesting thing that we are looking at, which is also a differentiator as a very differentiated offering, is customization of your offerings. I think that's an area where, even though we are a product company, there are several ways in which you can deliver the product. So the core product is a physical product, but the overall product has a product and a service as well. So with customization, we've talked about customizing fragrances for hotels, for example, as in creating unique fragrances that suit their ambience, so that the hotel environment smells the same across different locations and gives consumers a feel-good feeling or a feeling of security when they're in different properties.
Sure. I think the other element of really taking your brand to different places, different locations, new markets, is customer acceptance, right? I mean, how easily do customers, even in a different city, respond to your brand, given that there are incumbent brands present in that city? So all of you have supervised brands which have expanded cities, even within the south, for instance. When you move from, say, Bangalore to Chennai, and maybe, Ketan, you can take this. What is your initial sense on customers? Are they willing to accept, try out your brand? Is there some benefit in terms of crossover? People who've been to Bangalore, do they take some element of knowledge, awareness, word of mouth publicity?
Sure. Our experience at P&R was very interesting. Of course, between Bangalore and Chennai, as one would imagine, there's a lot of crossover in terms of people moving from one city to another. They are quite close. But we figured that when we moved, in the first year itself, there were a huge number of customers that did recognize our brand and came to us and had stories or experiences to share. And it's very heartening to go through some of these experiences when people walk in and associate themselves with the brand. And we've been able to give our customers in Chennai this similar kind of experience that they get in our Bangalore stores. So it has been a very rewarding experience from that perspective. Yeah.
Okay, great. I think the other interesting question, since we're on the theme of expansion, right? I mean, as an organization, what are those decision criteria? What are those triggers that one uses before deciding to expand markets? I mean, an obvious first step would be to consolidate in the market which you're in, look to build up. If there are new locations where you can target new set of customers, you can. So that has a natural advantage because your brand is well known, right, in that market. So internally, if you're taking that decision, if you're having a discussion around expansion to 2 new markets, what are those 3-4 triggers where you decide, yes, it's time for me to move, just in terms of my scalability, in terms of my brand, in terms of my reach? What are those trigger points? Maybe CK would be good to get your thoughts on this.
Yeah, but we had a completely different response when we first moved on from Chennai to Bangalore. It was not working for us. In retail, what we learned is success in one market will not guarantee you success in another market. You have to go and start over, all over again, and start building the brick by brick. Only then the market gets built up. We were thinking a lot of IT crowd is common. A lot of people travel from Bangalore to Chennai to Bangalore. Brand is already known in Chennai, so we can get into Bangalore. No, it didn't work like that. So it has to be a completely new learning process. Every market in India is very different. Especially the metros, you have to go there and retail business, and you have to build that market, and only then move to the next market. That's what is our learning process. Secondly, we can look at a lot of similarities in terms of what is the rental business going, what is the surrogate retailer like a Pizza Hut or a Subway or any other lifestyle brand, how are they doing in a particular market? How is the IT crowd? Is it a new crowd which is there in the market? Pune and Gurgaon kind of market where it is a lot of IT crowd is there. These are some of the variables we can look at and see how the student crowd is there, because this is a very lifestyle oriented product and fashion and style oriented product. We need to look at for the people like that. Bombay, for instance, is a retail nightmare where market is there, but getting a retail space at a rental is something which is absolutely not possible. So going and playing the game in that market is very, very difficult proposition. So those are some of our learnings.
Sure. It's actually, in some sense, I think what you've mentioned is scalability, or you might believe to be commonalities between markets, is actually not that easy to transplant markets. I think the key kind of question or counterpoint I would say is that, have you seen any similarities which have helped you scale up faster between markets? Is there anything at all which has probably worked?
Yeah, IT, for instance, if the market is having a good number of IT people, it's very likely to work out. It may take a little longer time, but it's a very sure bet. You are going to be there, you are going to be successful there. I think that will be one new husband and wife yearning. That's the kind of, if the crowd is like that, I think that's a very good market for the beauty and salon business.
Sure. I think one of the other practical challenges when you expand, we've spoken about the need to profile the customers, to understand the market potential, and to also look at whether your brand can actually transplant between locations. But I think one of the other key challenges, which I'm sure most of the panelists here will agree, is organizational capability. Right? How do you build management bandwidth to make sure that expansion into new markets is successful, gets the required amount of effort? And similarly, how do you find the right set of people? Because in a lot of retailers, the kind of people you have both in the back end and in your stores are critical to the success of your business. So Rahul, thoughts on that from your experience?
See, one of the things which we have learned is that the most critical thing about expansion is that can you carry over the organizational culture to the new market? Because that's the only way you will be able to sustain your effort in that new market. And for that, you must be able to have a very clear articulation of what kind of people, what kind of culture do you have in your organization. And the new recruits have to necessarily be indoctrinated into that culture. And for that, if you depend on, just face-to-face interviews, I think you are really depending too much on what you feel is right. So if you can supplement that with certain more validations, especially when recruiting the new people. So I think it's far better to go slow and recruit the person who you have a higher confidence that the failure rate will be lower than just go wild and expand. Because what I have seen with my earlier work experience also is that when you expand rapidly, each of the new markets, the teams which you recruit have their own culture. And they don't look anything like what the culture of the core organization is. And that's what also causes a lot of problems as you go forward. So if you can create techniques, or there are multiple tools available to reduce the possibility that you're taking a completely wrong fit for your organization. And I think that to me is a very critical thing which I would look at.
Okay, sure. I think moving on to something which is at the core of a retailer, right? The assortment or the product or the service offering that you give in different markets. Obviously, as from an operational efficiency point of view, you would want to keep the core assortment fairly similar, but India is a heterogeneous market. There are markets where customers require or pretty much demand a certain different customized product offering or a service offering from you. So how do you manage that disparity of still maintaining what is core to your company, which in some sense plays on your brand, but at the same time catering to specific customers in different markets? Manoj?
I think our range is pretty much the same everywhere. We have to tweak it a little bit market to market. Like, for example, in Hyderabad, green would sell. In Bangalore, green sells less. So these are small tweaks which we learn as we go along. And if you have a strong IT system, you get this feedback very, very quickly, and you act on it very quickly. That is very crucial. And in fact, the further away you are, the more important your IT system becomes. You need to get this feedback accurately, very correctly, and in different attributes. Sizes, for example. When you go north, you need to sell more of bigger sizes. This is something which everybody understands and knows. But there are lots of things which you don't know when you go into a new market. And you get this feedback if your planning of your IT is properly done. So this is very crucial. By and large, you can't have too many changes in your product, because then your brand identity becomes confused. What your brand stands for is very confusing to the customer. You tweak it a little bit.
Okay. So actually to do this, in fact, it's a very interesting point, to understand what the customers want, which then has an implication on your assortment, on the way you offer your position your store in different markets. I think you talked a little bit before about the amount of planning which goes in. So I think maybe useful to just go around and understand, if you're moving into a new market, how long does it take for you from a decision perspective to get your planning in place, to understand about the market before you are really convinced that this is a good opportunity and you actually go in?
Not too long. In the beginning, we used to think a lot. Now, the entire process is sort of streamlined. So it's very standard. We check what our competition is doing. Today, you can almost get figures very easily from malls, what your competition is doing. And you gauge, okay, your competitor X is doing so much, so you'll be able to do so much. And you get information from non-competing brands. Like we are in ladies' ethnic wear, we would find out what the men formal wear, like what's a Van Heusen doing, what's the other brands doing, what's the Nike doing, what's the Reebok doing. And you pretty much gauge. And then you make a projection. And I think pretty much you're pretty accurate. We make projections before we open. And 3 months after we open, 6 months after we open, we compare the actuals with the projections. The projections will be sale, the salaries, the advertisement spend, rentals, of course, is a given. All these things are projected. So you pretty much know where you are before you start. As you grow, your projections tend to be more and more accurate.
Okay. Kiran, your thoughts on this? How long does it take you, or what's the decision process before you enter into new markets?
I think at a broad level, you have an annual plan in terms of what markets you want to address. And that's where it starts. And you would have already captured, because you're already doing your annual budgeting for how many new stores you need to have for the coming year, and then you move forward. But if there are opportunities that come in between, I think the planning process, the key parameters to consider are the kind of industry that you're in. What is the payback and the break-even point for a new store that you're going to put, and that has bearing on several factors. Mm-hmm. It's the market potential. It's about whether you understand the market properly enough. It's whether there's an unmet need in that particular market. I think these are factors that you need to consider before you actually do that. And you do have a lot of support from market research that will tell you about potential of different clusters within certain markets. So even if you want data about a mall or a high street, there are several companies that actually give you that data that will help you in understanding the potential of that. You can use that as a benchmark for understanding what you can do, and then you need to have your budgets in place. And finally, the manpower planning is an important thing.
Okay, sure. I think what we have at least seen in our work, the importance of catchment mapping is critical. So essentially, once you've finalized on a location, really understanding the location, the radius around it, the customer profile, economic background, and then essentially almost, and then just reflecting what I've heard, really building up a very, very accurate estimate of who is going to come there, what is the competitive intensity, what do you really need to do, and then pretty much tailoring your entire approach in terms of marketing, in terms of, one, obviously the store location strategy itself, but then you're pretty much your entire strategy as a predicated upon what you really understand very deeply about the catchment that you want to target.
Yeah, no, I just want to add to what you said, because we in our business tend to do exactly that kind of thing. So one is new market, so it could be a new city and it could be a new market within the city. So many of the markets sometimes behave slightly different from others. So we, for example, in Bangalore we have 5 stores, and some markets behave extremely different from others. But of course, I agree with Manu that your core of the brand has to remain the same, but you definitely need to tweak the kind of merchandise that you offer. But then we have to be sensitive to the market that you are in, and tailor-make some of your services at least to those particular markets in terms of convenience factors and what they look for, price points. Price points, we believe, is extremely important in terms of getting it right. Because though even if you're in the same city, 2 stores, you realize that they can be quite different, and you really need to make that change within the store to provide that to make sure that you're in the right zone for that customer segment.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Rahul, your thoughts on this?
So, you asked earlier about what are the triggers for going to a new market and how would you decide it? So in our case, it's very clear, it's an investor-led. So it's a pressure either this way or that way. And most of the times, in retrospect, when we look at it, the decisions were wrong. Okay. Because it's not done in the logic in which the business should be run, but based on the logic of somebody who's looking at it purely from a value creation or whatever that name you want to call it. So first, if we look at today, if we look at a new market, we would typically take about 2 to 3 months to take a call on getting into the new market. And then there is the choice of which market you want to really attack. And that decision, I think, there's no science to it. So you can, as CK was saying, that Bombay as a market is very attractive to most businesses because it's the largest market for many of the categories. But it's a very hard market to operate. So my only thing is that if we do look at a new market, then we are very clear and we are committed that we will put our best foot forward and go whole hog in that market. Because we have seen too many times where we have taken half-hearted decisions based on other factors, and then that just doesn't work out. So you have to go full blast at a market when you want and throw all the possible resources you want, you can, to really make that market successful.
Sure. Just continuing that thought, right? How long do you give a new market before, in some sense, deciding internally whether the decision was right, driven by logic, or in some sense, driven by investor? So how long do you really wait? And
I would say 9 months for anything in the world. It takes 9 months to produce a baby. It takes 9 months to take the right call.
right.
So I think 9 months is all it should be given.
Okay. Manohar, your thoughts on this?
I think, I think in our case it's a little different. We do a lot of research before we get into the market. And if it's a new mall, then we have to wait for that mall to mature. But if it's on high street, if it takes off immediately. If it doesn't do well, it won't do well from the beginning. It doesn't take us 9 months, except in new malls. New malls sometimes take a lot of time to mature.
Okay, interesting. I think probably the last part of the discussion, one element of taking the brand, we've spoken quite a bit about national, taking a brand national. I think the other aspirational view is to take the brand international. I think at some point in time, perhaps not now, but 5 years, 10 years down the line, I'm sure a lot of you have that in mind. What are the whole new set of factors that will come in once you kind of take that decision or take that call to go international?
I think one big challenge when you go international is that you can't get back goods because of customs and other formalities. So when you send the goods, it's a one way, it just goes. We of course, all our own stores as well as our franchising, we've started franchising now. It's always on consignment basis. Whatever doesn't sell comes back. So we've had talks with some people in the UAE, and we always tell them this is what is it. We send you the goods, we can't take back the goods. And all brands work on this basis. So this is one of the big challenges. You have to be really careful in what you send out.
CK, your thoughts on this?
International markets, the brand registration, the licensing, and getting the right partner, it's a really a long journey in making it happen. It's minimum of 1 year for you to get these things together before we enter into a market. And also you need to approach it a lot more slowly because there is a lot of uncertainties or nuances which you may not know. You require the other partners to support you from that aspect. So you need to approach the international market a lot more slowly. Third is, I feel is you should get into market where there is money power. No point in going to Bangladesh or Sri Lanka where you can make more money in India. You go and sell the product in that places and get 70% or 60% of the same value. You should go to market which values like Dubai or a Singapore or a USA, which will give you 5 times and 10 times same service is given disproportionately higher price. So look at the dollar value and how the India versus that market thing is there. So go into such markets, that will be a much better idea to go into.
Good. So that's actually a very interesting point, and particularly in retail, I think that approach is in fact better. If you look at some of the other industries, a logical view which people take is, let me go to a market which is very similar to my market. It's easy for me, I understand how to succeed there. But I think in retail, given that India itself has so much potential, if you are really looking to expand internationally, you would much rather choose something which gives you a value multiplier effect. And I think that's what you're referring to. Kiran, your thoughts? I think you've taken your brand international. What are some of the challenges you see from a brand perspective?
Yeah, from a brand perspective, if you want to take your products and it has to be sold overseas, there are several factors which come into play. The entry barrier for your products will be very, very high. Depending on the product category that you're talking about, the penetration of different products, the product penetration is already quite high. So these markets are already matured. So when you enter a market, the cost of communicating and reaching out to the consumers will be much higher than the cost in India. So how are you going to actually plan for that, and how will you reach out to the consumers and create a market out of your products is a very important thing. Also, your product is designed for the Indian market. So if you take it overseas, you certainly have to tweak it. You cannot change it completely, but you certainly have to tweak it, understand what consumer needs are elsewhere, and then do product innovation in order to ensure that the product is positioned accordingly. One other thing that I see a lot of other companies do is in low involvement categories, because of the high cost of entering new markets, I see a lot of private labeling being done. So even in our industry, for example, the home fragrance market in India, as a case in point, the air care market in India is pegged at about 500 crores, according to an NCIA report recently. A Euromonitor report puts the air fragrance market in the US close to about $6 billion. So when you see the market size, you would feel that there's a lot of opportunity. But the fact is, if you look at the sales, if you look at channel strategy, you would see that about 85 or 90% of the sales come from organized retail. Right. And a lot of private labeling is already present there. So in our category, a low risk way of accessing overseas markets, if you are not clear about how you want to grow your brand, but if you want to look at the opportunity in those markets, is to look at private labeling or JVs or partnerships with other existing brands there.
Sure. It's actually interesting. I think there are good case studies in terms of certain companies from countries similar to India, where obviously there is a little bit of hesitation in accepting the brand in international markets. How do you build a cultural affiliation to that brand with the country of origin? So I think Sri Lankan tea, pure Ceylon tea, which has been trademarked, is a great example of really linking that product to a very cultural element of that country, and then using that as a value proposition when you go abroad, which is one way of, in some sense, differentiating brands from markets like India. So I think that's something which we've seen going on. So I think we are nearly at the end of the session. Maybe quick parting thoughts from our panelists in terms of a future-looking view, looking into the crystal ball, maybe 5 years down the line. Do you at least envision each of your companies being there throughout the country, or do you think it'll be a kind of a gradual halt to reach where you would like to reach? So 5 years down the line, what do you think? Will you be able to kind of scale up, reach throughout the country?
Well, we're now at 60 stores. 5 years from now, we'd probably be maybe 250, 300. At least that's what we're planning now. God willing, it'll happen.
Rahul?
I am very hesitant to project 5 years down the line. But I think the fundamental nature of the company will change. And we will no longer be doing exactly what we are doing 5 years down the line. The delivery model is likely to change. And I think the revenue from services is also likely to come down in favor of products. So that's what I see happening.
Okay. CK?
We want to, my goal is to create 1,000 women entrepreneurs, 3,000 salon and 50,000 jobs. That's what we want to create in the next 5 years.
Awesome.
Round of applause.
I can't beat that. So, no, but from our perspective, we definitely looking at it's a wonderful market. There is space for a lot of newcomers, existing players in the market. And for us, it is as much as we can institutionalize the business in terms of creating the processes of a high involvement, specialized retail as what we are. As much as we can institutionalize it and create the processes, I think growth is available for us, and we're definitely looking at first a South India footprint and then taking it further.
Thanks. Kiran?
Yeah, I think with us, with Iris as a brand, we would be targeting at least about 50% compound annual growth year on year for the next 5 years. And this kind of opportunity for growth is not there in too many mature markets. So I'm happy to say that we're in India now with the brand, and there are exciting times ahead.
Great, thank you. Thanks a lot. I think in just to summarize, I think the entire discussion, great discussion. Thanks a lot for all your views. I think some key takeaways really are when you're looking to take your brand and expand to different markets, organizational capabilities, planning is a critical element. Long-term plan, we've heard about annual plan, and then making sure that you understand that catchment, understand the location very well, and use that in your entire strategy. I think the second key message is not to spread yourself too thin. Yes, there are opportunities outside of your core markets, but do so carefully, do that in an organic manner, do that so that your brand doesn't suffer, Because at the end of the day, the success of your store will depend upon how you're able to translate that brand to different markets. So I think that's something which came about. So a lot of thought process which really goes into that. Third, I think intelligent marketing, using some of the new age themes. I think it's heartening to hear social media, targeted marketing, working out for some of you. I think that's a key takeaway for all of us in terms of, I think that's the wave of the future, especially if you're constrained from a investment standpoint. So again, doing that. I think fourth theme, learning from mistakes. At the end of the day, it's an iterative process. You need to understand, learn what customers really think in each market, and then go back there if you believe that there is still potential in that market. So I think those are 4-5 key themes that we've heard through the discussion. I think maybe any thoughts, any questions from the audience, happy to, sure.
Hello. Hi. I wanted to know that as we grow in increasing a number of outlets, be it in the same city or be it across states, how important is it to maintain the same price hygiene in terms of price standardization? Is it important while we talk about brand building?
Sure. I think that's a given. Almost everybody who's expanded has the same price everywhere. I don't know of any chain who has got different prices in different locations.
Unless it's tax related.
In fact, even if it is tax related, like in Mumbai, you have a 3% octroi, but everybody's prices are the same.
We have what do you call A pricing, B pricing, and C pricing operating in the same metro. There is a reason, if you can give a reason for the change in terms of the decor, in terms of the product used, and in terms of the service provider, you can afford to charge 3 different pricing, but so long as it is in the same price band, you can't be operating on a different price bands. That will be very detrimental to the brand. So say suppose the haircut price between 120 and 150, we have kept it for men haircut. With that we play around. That much band we can play. Completely changing is no for us. For a mall kind of situation where the rentals are higher, where there we have completely operated a new price and menu and things like that we have tried. And customers are fairly understanding. We have not faced, we thought too much on that. We thought whether customer will accept, will have question, they will go here. No, it was not happening like that. As long as you have a price card for that store and you have a rhyme and reason for why you are charging so much, I think the customers are not questioning that. That's our experience.
Sure.
So, there is a theory which says that a brand really caters to a kind of customer. And over a period of time, you have to recruit the kind of customers who like your brand. You cannot cater to everybody. The fundamental rule of marketing is the minute you start trying to get everybody happy, then you're sunk. So you have to be very clear who is your customer base. So in our case, for example, at a very broad level, we are very clear that we love women, we don't like men. Absolutely. No, there's a gentleman suits guy also here. So, and we have stuck to that definition. So we are very clear when we go out searching for customers, that's going to be my target. So whether there is a pressure, because always the pressure is to try and get incremental business by trying to get, okay, why don't you get men, they'll give you more business. Why don't you get kids? Yes, you can, but then the core customer base, you are basically, so if you are focused on your core target segment and your communication is very clear, then you will attract the kind of customers you want.
Just to add to that, I think your question was, how do you find this segment? How do you find the segment? You have to understand your brand to understand the segment. This is my theory. Because if you understand what the brand wants to stand for, who is that, if you wanted to paint a picture of your ideal customer or your ideal competitor in terms of who is their customer and who is your customer, and and then basically if you start to paint that picture, and then if you look at those type of customers, then it's very easy to just go and start then trying to track them in terms of where they live, what they drive, where they eat, what kind of job profile, age profile. So if you do these kind of things, I'm sure that it comes. But I think the core of what I'm trying to say is it comes from what your brand stands for.
There is another exercise which is called personification of the brand. That is, you take your brand and try to personify it into a person. And then the characteristics, to add on to what Ketan said, the characteristics of the brand come out in the person. I think that's a very useful exercise in understanding who your target consumer is. But you also have to understand that your target customer is not the one that you want it to be. The positioning is all about what the consumer thinks about your brand in their mind. So you might spend on positioning your brand some way, but they might understand it another way. You try to get to know about it through qualitative research, to try to see what consumers think about your brand, what they value in your brand.
One last question, perhaps? Yeah.
This is to CK and that YLG, both the salon people. I think you have spread out in South India. And recently we have also tried to spread out to the neighboring states. And the biggest problem we have faced is the language. What was your experience on that?
Language, we haven't faced much problem in terms of language as a barrier across the India or wherever we are, because we are catering to the middle and higher middle class and above. So because of that, English has become a link language for us more than the local language. So we haven't faced much problem in terms of this thing. Again, it depends on the segment. If you are going one leg below and getting to the mass market, which is the middle class and lower, language will play a very important role. As you go up the ladder, English will come into play into a common role. That's what is our experience.
Same here. We've had no issues with language. I'm not a South Indian, but I have no problem with South Indian languages.
The problem is my employees, we have to bring some employee from the HO. They are not very conversant with the local language. So to converse with our own employees, it becomes a problem.
So, earlier I was talking about the organizational culture, and I think that is the more critical part rather than the language. Because if the person is entirely steeped in your culture, then he or she will figure out a way to operate in a market where the language is different. But if you import a completely different culture into a new market, then you have a serious problem. But by and large, what I feel is that people who are supervising the front end need to be conversant with the local language for sure.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thanks, everyone.